Hey, real quick before the video starts, this is mostly me just talking, so would probably recommend you probably post me off to the side while you do something else during this. Just FYI. I'll probably have some kind of like video game footage off on the side if you want to actually look at it and pay your full attention to it, but figured I'd let you know. A lack of follow through can result in stagnation in behavior, circumstance, and most importantly, growth. Hi there, name's Andy. So here's a fun fact: I am or was a teacher for about 4 years. I've taught high school grades for 4 years, 3 of them in an alternative school, which, if you don't know, is often but not always where students with behavioral issues tend to go, or if some work better in a smaller environment, and 1 in a full public high school. I've taught both math and science classes, but that's enough about me. Let's go over some reasons why I'm taking a break from teaching. So, quick disclosure, much of what I'm going to say in this video is opinions based on my experience working as a teacher. So, don't take everything I say as fact or the correct thing to do. And if you agree or disagree, let me know. And since I've only ever taught in the high school space, I can't speak for middle or elementary school teachers, but I'm sure of what will be discussed may apply. So, let's start with something everyone would probably like. If you know anything about teaching, then you'll likely have heard about the sacred plan time. The time in which teachers aren't teaching a class and have time to, well, plan lessons, grade, print off papers, and maybe even use the bathroom for the first time since being in the building. Oftentimes, in my experience, there should be at least 1 class period per day that a teacher has a planned period. And here's a little fun bit of trivia for you. As of time of writing, we have been going through a teacher shortage, both for full-time and substitute teachers. So if a teacher has to call out for the day, and there are no substitute teachers available, guess who has to sub? If you said a teacher who really needs to get lessons ready, catch up on grading, and sorta kinda hasn't used the bathroom all day, then you'd be right. Now, the majority of administration teams, I hope, are aware of this being unfair and try to have teachers split subbing responsibilities if the need arises. An important side note, I've worked with principals who have helped fill in sub roles before, but I think that's rare. So if you're a principal, please, if you can volunteer to sub every now and then, it goes a long way to help teacher morale to see the bosses in the classroom too. There is also the manner of other assigned responsibilities that use plan time. These can range from department meetings, mentor meetings, meetings with principals. Man, there are a lot of meetings. Probably more I forgot. There's also the matter of building responsibilities too. Depending on where you work, you may be assigned hall duty, lunch duty, or something else. I understand the necessity of needing people in the halls to make sure students are where they need to be and not roaming and getting up to no good, but it would be nice if teachers didn't have to sacrifice their precious plan time for it. Unfortunately, besides hiring more people whose sole role would be monitoring the building, I don't see any other way of filling the roles. Let me be upfront and say that managing the classroom through consistency is probably my major weakness because I struggle with being consistent with some of the classroom expectations. At least, I think so. The classroom is the place where students should be able to learn about the world around them and be able to quell their curiosity of the subjects within the classroom. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. Teachers and students alike will know that depending on the combination of students that you will get will determine how much of your time will be spent teaching and helping students versus trying to spend most of the time getting the classroom calm enough to teach. You might imagine then that teachers such as myself who struggle with managing the classroom are going to have a very rough time being able to get students to stay calm, let alone be able to teach much. However, I've gone into other classrooms throughout my time to see how other teachers manage their classrooms, and I have to say, it varies from day to day. I've observed teachers manage their classrooms well, have bad days for their classes too, and vice versa. My oversimplified takeaway is that while a managed classroom will be more likely with consistency and better behaviors and less disruptions, it isn't a guarantee that the students you will get always follow the expectations, nor does it guarantee students will do the work required to be successful in the class. So, how about our core audience, the students? The ones that we work with, keep on task, and try very hard not to lose our minds over. First things first, people are multifaceted beings that have their own experiences, upbringings, beliefs, values, and problems. The same applies to kids, adolescents, their parents, their teachers, everyone. That being said, know that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to problematic behaviors. As mentioned earlier, I struggle with maintaining consistent classrooms, and part of that reason is because I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Or in other words, I like to give people a chance to prove they can be honest and kind. If there's an issue with a student, I prefer to talk with them about it and give them a chance to correct themselves. However, what happens when the student refuses to correct their behaviors or doesn't see it as a problem and continues to do it? A question we'll get into the next section, you'll see. Now, I want to say that I've taught a lot of students who have been wonderful in class. Occasionally, have some bad days, but that's okay. And they often acknowledge it too and apologize for it. Then there are students who, if we could sum them up in a quote, would be, didn't ask, don't care, not my problem. Let me know if you think that's accurate or not. These students may have a variety of things that affect them. Some may have trauma, suffer abuse, neglect, loss, be in low-income households. Some even have to work to provide for their families and themselves. And probably more I could list. These are issues no kid should ever have to go through, and may be reasons for why students have developed apathy and mistrust towards adults and the system that is supposed to help them. But, and big but on this, while these are terrible issues that may explain why students lash out and possess uncaring attitude towards school and its staff, we cannot have these behaviors be excused. Schools, hopefully, have the awareness and the resources to help students arriving from difficult backgrounds. While the goal is to help students navigate these difficult situations they find themselves in, we still need to help them learn that just because you've had it hard doesn't mean you get a free pass to do what you want and be disruptive or mean to the people around you. I've talked with a variety of students who have had to deal with the short end of the stick when it comes to life. And I've talked with both the ones who were well adjusted and the ones who weren't. And the thing that some of the students said was, I don't care about school. It has and won't help me get out of my situation. And then there was also, it doesn't matter how many times I get suspended, as long as I don't do anything too crazy, I will always be able to come back. Some students wanted to get suspended so they could get out of school. Kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. They can see patterns and behaviors that adults do, so if they notice they can get away with stuff, they will. Now, do I have a solution to this? No, not at all, but there are some people who should help us with students if the need arises. Principals, our bosses, announcers over the intercom, and the enforcers of school policy, allegedly. Of course, I should say before getting into the section, if you're a principal that leads by example, supports your staff, steps in to help with the classroom, listens to the staff when they are struggling with their students and their classroom, and ensures students who are being disruptive and disrespectful learn to stop those behaviors, then what I say in this section does not apply to you. I should also say that I have no experience being a principal of schools, nor do I want to. And I am also putting it out that I appreciate those who step up to the role of being an administrator to a school. I know there's a lot of responsibilities, meetings, expectations that you have to uphold, tackling a job that many of us would not even want to touch. Now, with that disclaimer out of the way, please, for the love of education principals, we need your help. In my 4 years of education, in comparison to being a student, I've noticed that students seem to have a lot more leeway with disruptive and disrespectful behaviors before something, if anything, is done about it. Here's what I mean about that. The typical cycle of discipline roughly goes something like this. Real quick BIS complaint, which is supposed to mean Behavior Intervention Support Team, I think. Just know it's part of the discipline cycle. If it supposedly works well with high schoolers, then why are we always trained by elementary school teachers who haven't taught or used it in a high school setting? Sorry, complaining out of the way. Step 1. Student is being disruptive in class, which unfairly disrupts the education of their peers. A warning is given. Step 2. Student continues the disruptive behavior. Student is sent to either a different seat or another room, followed by a call/email to parents or guardians about the behavior in the hopes that they can help curb this behavior. Step 3. Student continues disruptive/disrespectful behavior and is sent to another room, and a referral to the principal is made, to which a principal should have a discussion with the student and to lay out the consequences if the behavior happens again. Step 4. Student is able to return to class and is able to function just fine for a while until behavior starts up again. Step 5. Repeat behaviors lead student to suspension of some kind, be it in school or out of school. If you were a keen listener, you may have picked up that I used the word cycle when describing the process. Cycle implies these steps repeat and do not end. Step 5, in my experience, is a very rare occurrence when students have been continually disruptive in class and outright disrespectful towards me and other staff. This is where the quote from the start and the principals come into play. There will be students no matter how well you manage your classroom, no matter how nice or authoritative you are, no matter how much you try to connect and build a rapport with some students, they will be disruptive and disrespectful. The previous statement about students being multifaceted people who can have a lot going on in their lives still applies here, but there needs to be lines they can't cross, and there needs to be follow-through of repercussions if these lines are crossed. It will be a lesson they can either learn now in school, where they have the supports to help them improve, or they can learn the hard way when they're out on their own with little to no support. Having cycles of discipline that don't actually lead anywhere because they never end is a terrible lesson to students who might need that lesson most of all. Teachers don't have the authority for any discipline measures beyond the classroom that don't involve contacting the students' caretakers. It is the principals who have to make some very tough decisions on how to handle situations in which students are having behavior problems that repeat and that they are being disrespectful and disruptive. This is something that I once again have to preface, I don't envy them for, but it becomes very clear when I have students who are outright not taking accountability whatsoever and are in some cases blaming me for their behaviors after going through the steps of the cycle, and we never get past step 4. These students don't get the follow-through of discipline they need from the principals, and they end up right back in my classroom having learned nothing. And such, their disruptive behaviors and disrespect towards staff doesn't change. I have taught students who do this for an entire year. Nothing I do, being kind, authoritative, trying to connect, writing referrals, so many referrals, changes what they do in class. And it's not just me that it becomes unfair to, it's their fellow classmates who are constantly having their education put on hold because someone else doesn't want to be here. When I see students who ignore what I do to help them, send them out with a referral for the 4th time for disruptive and disrespectful behavior, and they end up right back in my classroom the very next day as if nothing happened with no follow-up communication from any principal, but seeing that the referral has been processed, it makes me feel like I'm not listened to, and the well-being of myself and my classroom is not being taken seriously. So please, principals, if we're going to have a system in place that is supposed to help students stay on track and understand they can't do whatever they feel like without consequences, let's help each other out, alright? I'm sure there's only so much you can do. You have bosses as well, but you have more power than the teachers do. Do the best you can with what you have, or find some ways to help out that's still within the rules that you can follow. So, just like with my disclaimer with the principal section, same goes here for the parents section. Parents who take care of their kids, talk with them, spend time with them when they can, who guide them when they make mistakes, and of course, hold them accountable for their actions. What I can say in this section does not apply to you. And once more, I am not a parent myself, and I can't think of any unpaid career more underappreciated than being a parent. The message here should be relatively brief compared to the previous section. Parents, you have a lot to do, and I can only sympathize with you. The closest thing I've had to a child is a cat. one that lived for about 16 years. And cats are way easier to take care of than a human child. Parents have bills to pay, jobs to work, both in and out of the home. Make sure that the kid is fed, hydrated, healthy, doing their chores, keeping up with school, not doing anything dangerous, mentally well, disciplining them when they are being disrespectful or aren't doing what they're supposed to, etc. And as mentioned before, parents are people who have their own problems to deal with on top of being a parent. So it is certainly understandable that if there's a lot going on in someone's life, they might lower their priorities on things that contribute to that stress. Students with a lot of stress may care less about school and start putting less time and effort into it because it's a stressor and things at home or a job seem more important. Some parents may act the same way with their kids, putting in the effort needed to make sure that they are still alive and that if they have siblings aren't trying to kill each other, but feeling too overwhelmed to get a phone call or email from school about how disrespectful the kid was today. Quick side note, can we please have school make sure that emails and more importantly phone numbers are up to date and working? I've called quite a few numbers over the years that straight up don't work, and the school has not made the effort to ensure that it's updated. From a frustrated point of view, it sometimes feels like parents who don't want to deal with phone calls from school provide a fake or non-functional numbers, so schools, please make sure these numbers work and follow up with the parent if it isn't. You can tell us to communicate with the parent first, and 40% of the phone numbers either don't work or give me an error, and that the voice box is full. So I can't leave a message anyways during those. Also, emailing the same parent and never getting a reply back from them either, it can be quite frustrating. Sorry, it's just really frustrating when teachers, principals, the school system, and parents are all supposed to have the same goal of educating the youth so they can understand and better figure out the world around them. It's so much easier to travel when you can read and understand the context of the signs telling you where to go and what's ahead. But we have systems that care more about arbitrary numbers of success than making people who can be successful. Principals who can't or won't address student behaviors in a way that matters, parents who don't seemingly care what their kids are doing or correcting their actions, and teachers who are being asked to do more and more that isn't a part of their job description on top of all the responsibilities they already have to handle. Teachers have more and more stacked against them when they are just trying to educate the youth. Let's move on to the next section already. This is getting a little off topic. Alright, how about them school policies, am I right, fellas? The central office, superintendents, board of education, and maybe more. These folks are the bosses of principals. So this is where, as previously mentioned, principals may not be able to support teachers in a full because of what their bosses tell them what they can and can't do. Speaking of can't do, how do you feel about not being able to grade anything below 50% on assessments and assignments, even if a student doesn't do anything on it? Yep, that's right, because of certain policies regarding stuff likely involving funding and accreditation for a school district, which may or may not have to do with grades as well as graduation rates. There are schools that are implementing such a policy where the lowest possible grade the student can achieve, even if they do absolutely nothing, is 50%. And oftentimes, the lowest passing grade is a 60%. Which pretty much means you'd more likely have to try to fail a class versus trying to pass the class. This particular policy will be the main focus of this section, just FYI. Since I've never had this policy in schools I went to when I was a student, I can't say anything from first-hand experience as a student perspective, but I can speculate and observe from what happened when I taught. I have no doubt that students who are already primed to do the bare minimum will do even less, which was true based on my observations. I had some students never touch a single assignment through the course of the entire year, but did something under tests, which they often scored below 50% on anyways because they never touched the material to begin with. Also, as a refresher, these tend to be the students that disrupt the learning of class. So, it happens even more, because they are more disincentivized to even try to pay attention. They'll get half the credit anyways. Add this to a discipline system that doesn't follow through with disruptive students to correct their behavior, and you should see a pattern starting to form. Now, there are certainly great students who try everything they can to do to be actively engaged in class, and they're always a joy to have. Please don't think I've never taught classes that weren't disruptive, that weren't great. I know that I've been mostly negative and may give off that impression, but I've also had some wonderfully great students too. I've also had great interactions with students that were disruptive before because they learned from it and understood why they should stop. Now, back to the policy. Grades are supposed to represent a student's approximate understanding of the content, which involves effort and completion of various tasks to learn and explain the content. I tried to engage students and ask them to ask one another for help before asking me, because being able to teach the content to another person is a surefire way to demonstrate your understanding of it. And sometimes peers can explain the same thing in a way that makes more sense better than an adult can. One of the arguments in favor of this policy is that students who have low grades are less likely to try to get the grades up because it might seem impossible from their point of view. I mean, sure, I guess 1 or 2 students per class could legitimately use this opportunity well when they are given the need to. But what about everyone else? What message are we sending to schools that have a majority marginalized population that they just get half the credit for doing nothing? Not to mention how unfair it is for students who struggle but do the best they can. If I were a student in such a school, I'd think the school has little faith that I can hold my own in the classroom and that I don't deserve the chance to show just how well or just how little I know and understand the content. Why would I ask anyone for help when I can still get half the grade anyways? What's the point in trying? Learning is difficult, it requires a lot of effort, and I don't care for it because it's not going to help me at all in life. When am I going to use this stuff in my daily life? If you're a teacher, you probably cringed at that question. And of course, this policy is quite frustrating from the teacher's point of view because we can't accurately assess and grade students, which is a big part of our job aside from teaching. Another policy that is adjacent to the previous one is students being able to turn in late work all the way up until the last week of the quarter, with no penalty. Now, I would understand if a student was absent for a while or has family emergencies that pull time away from school to give them some type of extension on the due date. Mind you, these two policies tend to be applied to every student regardless of circumstance. To say it another way, having both these policies applied at the same time doubles the disincentive for students to pay much attention during class when their work is guaranteed to get a grade, and that they can wait far after the lesson has been concluded to even begin working on it. You can argue all you want about different skill sets and capabilities of different students, but due dates exist outside of the class environment, with bills such as rent, car payments, subscription services. There's also family events, housing, projects, and general things that need to be done in a timely fashion. Much like how students are more likely to not use their time well since due dates are not something they concern themselves with, a similar attitude may translate to when they're out of school and needing to pay their bills. They might think they have the same level of lenience as they did in school, and may spend all their money without leaving enough to, let's say for example, pay rent, which can lead to them being evicted if they don't pay in time. I understand that lessons of paying on time and doing what you need to do before it's too late are lessons that can be taught outside of school. However, schools often like to encourage teachers to maintain consistency, as we've mentioned before. How can we expect students to maintain the work ethic needed to succeed in school and hopefully life when we're the one place that lets them do the least in their development? Working hard at something doesn't guarantee you'll be successful in it, but it certainly increases your chance versus not attempting at all. And often trying something yields some kind of lesson to learn, whether or not you succeed at it. Jumping towards the teacher end of this policy, it completely throws off the workflow of grading both assignments and tests. I, and likely many other teachers who have taught in schools with this policy, have had students take 2 or more tests within the last 2 weeks of the quarter ending, not to mention the sheer amount of students asking me for worksheets that I had plenty of printed over 2 months ago, but have long since been discarded for worksheets over the unit that we are currently going through. So I have to print off these old copies for students, and half the time they lose them and I have to print them off again. Teachers also have to deal with the massive influx of assignments and tests to grade at the end of the quarter, where teachers most certainly have a deadline to do so, all because several students from each of their different classes decided to wait until the last minute to turn in everything for the quarter, instead of having irregular intervals of deadlines for assignments and tests throughout the quarter. Side note, I've heard from some professional learning meetings within the district I was teaching at the time that some teachers set deadlines for their classes because it worked better for their curriculum and the class management. If that's the case, then why do we even have this policy apply across the board when we can supposedly set deadlines for our classes even though we have the policy stating that we can't? It just doesn't feel like the consistency we are promoted to have in our classrooms and aspects of teaching are not being applied to the policies that dictate those very things. Now, the last tidbit for this section I want to say is something I'm not even sure about, so please correct me on anything that I get incorrect. So I'm fairly certain there's some kind of policy that limits or prohibits the suspension or expulsion of students in some way. I should reiterate, having kids in school, getting an education, learning how to read, write, comprehend the world, it is certainly up there in the most important things for kids to do. However, as stated before, when students sabotage the learning environment for their peers, something needs to be done to address it so that the sabotage stops, and the teacher can teach, and the students can learn. I've already talked about the cycle of discipline I've noticed in my years of teaching, how students who routinely disrupt the class and are disrespectful don't often get consequences that address those behaviors because they keep happening. I am aware that since public schools get their money from the government, and because the government policies that must abide, aka quotas to meet for the district, need to comply with such the rules, that way they can continue to be funded. I have not done much research on this topic, but I suspect, or have heard from other staff members I've worked with, that there needs to be enough enrollment, attendance, grade averages, and graduation rates in order for a school to continue to be funded. Since schools would certainly like to continue being funded, we start to cut corners, lower standards, expectations, and effort needed to succeed. I saw an email of our principal being very proud of the graduation increase within the graduation rates over the past couple years. Yeah, I'm sure almost no deadlines and handing out half the credit for no work being done probably maybe had something to do with that. School is supposed to be an environment to learn, try things out, struggle in a safe environment where help is available, to ask questions about how things work, to learn that you can't cross every line and you shouldn't expect to get away with it without consequences, but that the people that you're mad at or upset at in school hopefully want what's best for you and to be prepared for the curveballs that life throws at you, to become resilient in the face of adversity. I have seen so many students who don't even attempt something without asking for help. There will be times in life that you just have to try and figure things out for yourself, but there is an increasing trend of students who are essentially allergic to failure and either want help all the way through or won't try at all. And I believe the combination of all three of these policies are contributing to this type of behavior, not stopping it. Now, there's certainly other things that can contribute to this learned helplessness, such as AI, but that's beyond the scope of my purview for the time being. So, as you might imagine, these are some of the contributing factors for my and likely other teachers becoming burnt out and leaving the field. I never anticipated that teaching would be easy, but I presumed that with experience and planning, the following years would be more manageable. But it was a steady decline instead. Even while I was trying different ways of teaching and classroom management, I certainly think there's a bit of expectation versus reality from my end on what I was thinking would happen when I decided to become a teacher. Now, in regards to everything else, there's more that can be said about these topics and many more I haven't covered. But I've covered some of these broad issues I've encountered over my time in teaching, and the script is already more than 10 pages long, well, from what I'm currently writing, so I kind of just want to be done with this now. I tend to give other people the benefit of the doubt, which you may have noticed in how I approach some of these topics in this video. I know that there are students that are intelligent, capable, but disrupt class out of boredom or just dislike of school. I know that there are principals who work with and listen to their staff and do what they can when students are being disruptive and disrespectful. I know that there are superintendents who have done great things for the school districts and are an active part of it. I know the policies discussed in this video are not made with the intention to make the lives of school staff difficult, but they do. I know the majority of people who work in schools and education do so because they care about the kids within their care. But when that's not the case, it needs to be addressed. I was aware teaching would be difficult, especially at first, though I thought with more experience teaching, everything about it would start to become easier. Some things did, but parts that didn't were often because of a policy attached to it. I wanted to make this video as both a documentation of my own experience as a high school teacher between the years of 2022 and 2026. Sorry for all the elementary and middle school teachers out there. Hope some of what was brought up in this video applies to you too. I also wanted this video to be a message to anyone either interested in being a teacher or just an outsider of the education world. To prospective teachers, I say to be as steadfast as you can within your classroom as early as you can with the expectations and what behaviors you're allowing in your class. Being consistent is extremely difficult because even if you have a strong start, you have to continue to address disruptions and behaviors in the same way throughout the entire year. And while most students you get will either like you or tolerate you, you will get a few that dislike you for one reason or another that is outside of your control. Planning takes a lot of time for often very low return. Work with your fellow teachers in the same subject to help you with planning. Or if you're by yourself, try to get access to previous resources, or you may want to consider purchasing a curriculum elsewhere that covers the standards needed. We shouldn't have to do this, by the way. Having to buy curriculums just that way, our lives are a lot easier. Just putting that out there. To the district office people in charge of the policies for schools, please consider how these policies will affect the schools, both the staff working there and the students who learn there. To the principals, please listen to teachers when they mention a student they're struggling with, especially when there are multiple teachers who struggle with the same student. It's not a coincidence at that point. To my fellow teachers, keep doing what you can to stay sane and have a streamlined workload. To the students, please be kind and considerate towards your peers and school staff. There will be people who test your patience. Try your best not to let people get a reaction out of you. To you, dear viewer or listener, thank you for being here. And if you're still bored and want to see what you can do, consider looking at policies related to school districts in your area. Some districts may pop up on local voting ballots. Of course, make sure to read into what such policies will do and what they'll affect. It's very easy to make an uneducated vote. Well, I think that's it for now. Thanks again for watching, and have a wonderful day.